Welcome to the SRS Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron J. Babyar, and I'm the Training Director of Support Raising Solutions. Whether you're a new ministry worker or a veteran looking to increase your competence and confidence, Support Raising Solutions seeks to bless you in your quest to be a spiritually healthy, vision-driven, fully funded Great Commission worker. My guest today is a great guy, is a friend. He was on one of our initial 100 Days series podcasts that we put out a year or two ago. And so Kennex Chi, you are with the Navigators, and thank you so much for joining us again on the podcast.
You bet. I'm honored to be here.
So before we jump in, let's tell everybody a little bit about yourself. I know that you relocated in the last year or two, and you have a family. So tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah. So as Aaron said, my name is Kennex Chi. I'm being on staff with the Navigators with their Collegiate mission, specifically for coming up 25 years. And we actually started when I was a student at Oregon State and kind of worked my way down the West Coast to St. Louis Obispo, Cal Poly, St. Louis Obispo. That's where I met my wife, and then we moved from there to UC San Diego, and then to Cal State Long Beach, and then about coming up 3 years now. Actually, we moved to Colorado Springs, the headquarters of the NAV. So we've been here and enjoying the snow.
Wow! It's funny. I used to know no one in Colorado Springs, and now you live there, and Scott Morton lives there, and my sister lives there. And
there you go.
There's people for me to see anytime I'm in town.
It's a nice place. It's not bad.
It's very pretty. It's very pretty. Well, of course, I had you on today, Ken, to kind of dig into the topic of being courageous in support raising. Even now, here we are. We're recording this in the middle of the coronavirus crisis that has hit the United States. Of course, it's already hit a lot of, and still is hitting a lot of Asia, and it's in Europe, and it's everywhere now. It's everywhere. In fact, one of my best friends lives in Cape Town, South Africa, and they just found out they have a 21-day stay at home. No, really, stay at home. Don't leave. Not just a lockdown, but like don't leave your house kind of thing. So it's everywhere. It's everywhere, and this is a hard time to be courageous, and we need to be courageous. But then you get into even talking about support raising.
Right.
Wow, is this appropriate? Is this the time? What do we do? And of course, we have people that are listening to this that have been on support for years, and we have people who are listening to this who have just started or are just starting raising support. And so, first of all, let's say that you're someone that you're at that point where you have people that are raising support in your organization, or you're raising support, and there's a kind of a frantic conversation where someone says, "What do I do? How do I start?" So, Ken, good luck, man. What do you say?
That is great. I think there's always going to be fear, right? And because I think as human beings, we experience these emotions, and we all do. And Jesus talks about fear a lot, and I love how, if you look at Scripture, you see people that are fully human beings, with fear and whatnot. And so if I had a staff who would ask me that, one of the first thing I would recommend them to do is just, acknowledge the obvious, be honest about some of these feelings, these fears of the unknown, and some of the uncertainties that's potentially out there. And one of the things I love about, I was mentioning the Scripture, if you look at Nehemiah, this great leader, and then you see in chapter 2, when he's preparing to talk to the king for the resources needed to rebuild the wall. And I love it. This is in Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 2, the end of verse 2, and in verse 3, where he says, "I was very much afraid, but I said to the king, may the king live forever." And I love that. Just that Nehemiah, this great guy, and he was humble and honest enough to record. I think it's hilarious in the sense that you see Scripture recording these very honest fears that they have. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was coaching his staff, and she said, when I read that, I was so encouraged that, hey, you know what? It's okay to be afraid, to acknowledge that it's there, because we all experience that.
Right.
But that doesn't, not allowing that to keep us from moving forward. you know. And
Yeah.
again, if you look at Jesus, parable, or I'm sorry, in Matthew 14, when he walked on water and the disciples freaked out, they cried out in fear. I love that. Again, these disciples are such colorful characters that you just see them crying out in fear. And it was Jesus himself. Isn't that interesting? One of the things, Aaron, I love about is that is it possible that the very thing that is scaring us is the person of Jesus himself, that he wants
Mm,
to reveal himself to us in a new way? And I wish there's another way, because I don't like to be afraid. I don't
right.
like to, experience these fearful situations. But I do wonder, it's like, hey, maybe that's the
Right.
word.
So God
So,
doesn't give us a spirit of fear, and yet we are still human, and
yeah,
so we still engage in an earthly reality. And boy, we could get real deep into a theological construct there, right? So
yeah, definitely,
we'll
definitely.
stop it. Let's just at least acknowledge that God doesn't give us fear, but we do experience it sometimes.
Right,
And
right.
acknowledging that, or as I think you said, acknowledging the obvious, or however you stated that, is I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, and I think one of the ways too, we continuing with the idea of acknowledging the obvious, is that when take the opportunity to initiate, because just as we might be feeling some of these uncertainties, fears, and these, um, the situation, what is coming, the unknown, so are people, and especially so are donors and potential donors. And why not be upfront and just engage with these people to just say, hey, how you're doing? So one of the things I've been doing, even in my own support raising, is that my goal is to go through all my existing donors, to just at least contact them, whether it be a phone call or through text, even text messaging, because people are working from home and they're available. They answer my
Right.
text right away. To just say, hey, how are you guys doing? How is this new norm it's been for you guys? The interruption,
Yeah.
the disruption, and how are you holding up? And how's your family doing?
Yeah, just have that initial starting point. Actually, one of our coronavirus kind of crisis podcasts, the last one we published before this one, we actually dig right in on that very thing as far as how even to initiate that conversation. So that's really good stuff.
Yeah, and I think as ministers of the gospel, I think one of the things that we 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 don't want to wait till people to initiate towards us. I mean, obviously that's great. I know God does that, but I think in times like this, we need to be the ones who initiate and don't wait. I think if a friend mentioned that silence communicates irrelevance. And so
Mm,
if we just maintain silent, people are going to think, well, I guess this is not important, or they're not thinking about this. I guess it's not that
right.
important. So
And I understand why people want to duck and cover. Like I'm sensitive to that, and I think there might be at least an initial time, or maybe someone listening is even still in that, or they need a little season of just breathing and putting their faith in God and releasing fear and all that kind of stuff before they start making these phone calls and initiating. But don't stay there.
yeah,
Build a bridge and cross the bridge. Don't build the bridge and look at how pretty the bridge is, and you never actually use it to
right.
connect with the people that are your partners in ministry.
Yeah, and sometimes the tendency is that, well, I gotta have a perfect plan. I gotta know exactly what to say before I'm gonna start doing anything. As a former or as a recovering perfectionist, that's something that I realized that, hey, listen, sometimes you just gotta go forward. You just gotta
Right.
move, initiate, and start, take that first step. And
Right.
oftentimes I find myself enjoying the process, and people are encouraged, and so am I, because
Yeah.
it is a ministry.
Well, otherwise, if we don't move forward, then even though God doesn't give us a spirit of fear, we might be allowing that to kind of guide our steps, and we don't really want that, do we?
Oh no, I think that's one of the tendencies, and and obviously as people who are dependent on the generosity of God's people, one of the things that I realize in my own fear, there can be a temptation to stop giving and stop being generous.
Mm.
And man, if I can tell you one clear correlation I've seen in my funding efforts, is
Yeah.
that when I stop being generous, funds stop coming in. And,
Huh.
and and I wonder if that's one of those subtle ways, or maybe not so subtle ways, that God is reminding me, hey, Ken, you're relying on the generosity of my people. And how are you doing with the generosity? And I think there's
Yeah.
there's again, acknowledging the obvious that I know there's a tendency for me to be afraid. And when I'm afraid, I stop giving. And I don't want to do that.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean that boy, that opens up a whole nother box that we won't go into far. But I will say something that I've said before on other podcasts and the SRS boot camps of how dare we as people that have others partner with us, how dare we rob ourselves from partnering with others even in hard times? Like that is
Yeah,
something we get to do. It's not a burden. Now it might be a burden, as you do the math and your budget and things like
sure,
that. But
sure.
it's not. It's in reality, it's something that we get to do. Don't rob yourself of being generous to others, even in hard times like this.
Yeah. And what a great expression, a demonstration of a faith that, faith where James exhorts us, faith without works is dead. And it's like, I don't want to trust God. We get to continue to engage with God's people in his kingdom work.
Yeah.
And I think that's the I think the enemy will want us to believe that God is a God of scarcity, right?
Hmm.
Just like all these rationing, I can't find toilet papers, I can't find disinfecting wipes. God's got a ration his resources for his work. It's like, oh, dang it, there's this thing happening. I don't have enough. People got to wait in line. God's not a God like that. He's such a God of abundance.
Hmm. Hmm.
So let's
And also,
remind one another.
you just kind of spurred something with something you said there, Ken. So not that you and I have a script per se, but I'm gonna go a little bit off script here
Mhm.
and just say, hey, be gracious. There's probably people that are on your support team that are going to bail. I mean, you're probably going to lose some people.
Yeah,
It might be 10%, it might be 40%. I have no idea. But be gracious and be loving with those folks. And also don't be surprised. It's probably going to happen. People are probably going to have some reactions that you don't want. And just, you know, prepare your heart for that possibility. Prepare your mind for that possibility. You might have some people that, they touch base and they say, hey, we lost our job. We can't give. And that's not a time for you to go, well, when are you getting another job? And when can you start? That's probably the wrong response, right?
right,
um,
right.
but also just be loving and be gracious and maybe even say, hey, that's great. You know what? You're still my partner in ministry. Don't you dare stop praying. I understand you have to pause your giving right now. And maybe 3 months, 6 months down the road, you can get it going again whenever God provides. But in the meantime, you're still my partner in ministry. And
Yeah,
I'm still praying for you. Please still pray for me. Like, I want to encourage the listeners, be ready and be prepared to be graceful and
yeah,
loving, even though your reaction might be, oh no, what if I don't gonna have enough coming in then? What if, right? And
yeah,
yeah, God's not a God of scarcity. Things might be changing, they are changing, but there's still a lot of hope and
right,
still a lot of reason to just acknowledge that God is very much on his throne.
right.
So
Well said, Aaron. Yeah, yeah. And I think when that fundraising isn't biblical support raising, just isn't about money. It is a ministry. And I
yeah,
think sometimes we forgot, even, was reading the SRS article, where Scott Morton talks about, an encounter what he had with a donor that lost his job and couldn't give anymore. And Scott felt compelled to send him a check. And it became one of those situations where the supporter was being supported by the mission. And I'm
yeah,
thinking, Lord, how cool is that? That this is a partnership. It's back and forth. It isn't just one way.
yeah.
And how we care for one another. What a testimony too for the
Hmm.
world to see.
Hmm.
Well said.
Well, let's transition. It seems like one thing that's needed is to have a different perspective, which is a perspective that's different from the world's. How are you encouraging your staff within NAVS to have that different perspective in this unique moment in time?
Yeah, good question. I think one of the ways is that, I, we when we were working with some of our ethnic minority staff in the funding, we it pretty clear right away we'll see the kind of the challenges that seem to be very common. We see patterns of challenges like lower socioeconomic backgrounds and lack of contacts and some of these challenges that we would see. And I remember I was talking with an ID staff, and I think one of her comment was, "How do we turn these liabilities into assets?" And I thought that was a very interesting perspective of In other words, what she's saying is that how do we turn a crisis into an opportunity? So for example, one of the things that's happening in our collegiate context is that campus ministry now happens without a campus because all the students are home because the schools are closed, and so it is becoming a virtual ministry. But then at the same time, one of the things we're realizing is that students are back home. It is almost God is sovereignly placing them back in their family, their relational context for the gospel to spread. And that's one of the things that, especially in some of our ethnic minority communities and students, is that the family context is such a big deal. And I wonder maybe this is one way that God is kind of getting our attention is that, hey, look, I'm gonna change how you look at campus ministry. Yes,
Hmm.
students are important, but what about their family members, their relatives, their extended families within the students' lives? Maybe God is opening this door, this brand new opportunity that we'd even thought of before,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So kind
Very.
of turning that around and say, hey, what are the new opportunities that God is opening?
And
And
that's really that is reframing it. So the situation might not be changing, but you're reframing how you're looking at it. You're reframing how you respond to it. You're taking a very real situation and not just looking at it myopically, but going, okay, what are some other ways? What are some God infused ways of having a healthy perspective on
yeah,
this crisis, so to speak?
yeah, and the vision is still the same, right? Because the gospel of Jesus Christ is still the answer to
Hmm.
everything, to every culture, to every generation, to every crisis that comes up, even any pandemic that comes up. So the answer is still the same, but I think we get to explore and get to see, Lord, what do you want to do now? How can we come together? How do we brainstorm? How do we keep trusting you for your
Right.
gospel to move forward in these new
Right.
opportunities?
So you
You know.
probably have to battle off some assumptions, some bad assumptions, right?
Oh, right, yeah, and that's the thing. This is where I think um, when we don't have good information or accurate information, we assume the worst. And I do that, right? It's like, oh no, there's a pandemic, everybody's in a lockdown, and every single one of my donors lost their jobs, and every single one of my donors are going to stop giving. And I just think like, wait, hold on, just kind of sometimes we have to kind of catch ourselves, Aaron, and say, hey, stop. What am I getting this from? Right? One of the things that what I learned when we were doing training in the Philippines with our staff, one of the staff made this comment that, whenever there's a natural disaster, people's giving skyrockets because they
Hmm.
see a clear need. And I thought
Hmm.
that's kind of interesting. It's that, you know, so in a sense, I mean, this might sound kind of terrible, Aaron, but it's like maybe there's a reason sometimes God rocks us with, you know, these crazy things that happen. Maybe it's to kind of wake us up to like, hey, look, I am still enthroned in heaven. Don't have control. And people, I think, generally are still very generous, right? And it reminds me of even 9/11, after September 11, how, just the philanthropy and giving just skyrocket because people realize the need, the
Yeah.
crisis, this opportunity that's there to serve one another.
And that doesn't mean that everybody's going to have the resources or the means, but some people really will. We were joking on one of the podcasts that we've done recently. I'm recording a bunch of these in a row, so I apologize if I refer back to things you haven't even heard about yet, Ken. But
That's okay.
one of the jokes that we said is, "Hey, if you have someone on your support team that's in the toilet paper industry, this might be a good time to ask for a lift."
Oh, no
Because
kidding.
they're doing. My guess is they're doing okay, right?
Yeah. So it's not like just even across the board where everything's the same. And even that reminds me, Aaron, it's one of our coaches, Kim. She's in Arizona, and we were just having a little coaching call together with our fellow coaches. And one of the stories she shared was just this a conversation she had with her brother, one of her brothers. I think he's a believer, and then she was just kind of sharing with him, like, a lot of the staff are afraid in light of the economic downturns due to the
Sure.
virus, but his response was quite surprising. His response was, "Hey, you know what? Why would people stop giving? I would think people are all the more eager to give, especially to people who are in religious." you know, who are helping people understand like life isn't just about the physical,
Right.
and that was very interesting. Is that because I think again, it's just that assumption. I'm going to assume people will stop giving, but maybe that's the opposite of what,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
That
And
people are actually
that
more
might be true for a
responsive.
few people, right? That might exactly be true for a few people.
Mhm, mhm.
And it might be because of their job situation, or it could be something even more serious. It could be a heart situation. It could be a
Right.
trust situation. Like they're spiraling spiritually right now. And
Yes. Yes.
you're,
The
you're,
nerves, their nerves are exposed and raw because
yeah.
God is doing something. Yeah.
But that's not going to be true of everybody. And some other people, they're going to be reframing it. They're going to, in fact, so I am doing the social distancing. I mentioned on different podcasts that, I've been doing 99.99% social distancing. So that the point oh 0.01 for me is I prefer to wear a mask and gloves if I have to go away from the house. And
Uh-huh.
we do have a store nearby. And I actually ran to one of my supporters.
Oh,
And
that's great.
we were standing probably closer to 10 feet from each other, having a conversation. I think there was a pallet of detergent between us, and I said, "Hey, how you doing?" And he said, "Hey, I said, I'm good." He goes, "We're good." He goes, "My business is slowing down. I'll be honest with you." He said, "But I've really been processing that because my I was thinking about my giving. I was thinking about my budget, and I was also praying for you and Marky.
Mm.
Ken, I'm not even sure if you're aware of this. We were in Malaysia last week.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
It's the Lord, but it was there was some stress, but we got here. Thank God. But anyway, he said I was praying so hard that you guys would get home, and he goes, and then I was also considering my finances. And he goes, and for a second, I thought, well, maybe I should lower my giving because my work is starting to turn down. And again, he's just like monologuing. I'm not saying anything.
Huh.
And then he goes, but you know what? I realized how could I? Why would I do that? I get to invest in something that's helping the world. Yeah, like a great commission. It's kingdom minded. Like so I don't care if our my salary goes down a little bit. I'm not going to be changing my support. And again, I didn't even ask any questions, but here's a guy that he's on my support team. He prays for us, and he's very much a partner in ministry. And he was he had already reframed it. We're talking about reframing things. He had already
Mm.
done it in real time and just blessed me with that without me even having to ask. And so, yeah, we are all in process, both us who are full-time ministry workers as well as our supporters. We're all in process of learning to trust God through this entire situation and turning crisis into opportunity.
Yeah, and what a great story, what a great testimony is too. Aaron, I love how there are people out there like that, and if none of us were in the journey of support raising, I don't think any of us would have experienced that, experienced how God uses these donors to encourage us, to remind us. It is a team effort. They are partners. It is
Mhm.
a ministry where they minister to us and we get to minister to them and back and forth. And
Yeah.
just as we have a focused ministry of the people that we're hoping to reach, these I just think of these donors, what a blessing and what a privilege to get to engage with people, in this context. What a neat story.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm thankful for it. I really am. Well, Ken, we're not done yet, but we are kind of moving towards the end of our podcast.
Mhm.
You're full of awesome ideas and thoughts here. So let me give you the final word or two here before we wrap up.
Yeah.
Your head and heart, you were kind of preparing for sharing with the ministry workers that listen to this from all over the world. So, what else has God laid on your heart before we wrap up today?
Yeah, I just like to share. This is Jeremiah 32:17. It's one of those verses that you see it's I didn't find it. I heard somebody quote it. So it's the verse just talks about it's Jeremiah's prayer when he opens up by saying, "O sovereign Lord, you made the heavens and the earth by your great power and outstretched arm. Nothing is too hard for you." And I think it's we just need to be reminded that first of all, who God is and the eternal perspective that we need to have. Right. So that would be the first one. That's go back to him. Let's make sure we're rooted and grounded and having the people around us that who will remind us of this foundational truth. But then the other thing I would add to that is let's not forget ministry. Biblical support raising is ministry, right?
Mm,
Like just even throughout our podcast, we talked about it involves people. And these are people with feelings, with emotions, with dreams, with things that God has laid in their hearts, right? And so what does it look like for us to minister to them? Not just, from a financial perspective, the partnership of finances, but how do we minister to them? And let me just end with this quote from, again, the coach Kim on our call. She said, I love it, Aaron. Check this out. She said, people's doors might be closed, but the walls to their hearts are down. And I love that because of this crisis, right? We're practicing social distancing. Proximity-wise, we might be very distant from one another. But you know what? When a crisis like this happens, people's walls to their hearts are down. And what incredible opportunity we get to have as ministers of the gospel to bring this hope, to bring this healing, to bring this eternal life to those who are out there.
Good stuff. Good stuff, Ken. Well, my friend, it's an honor to have you on the podcast again. Let's do this again sometime, okay?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. It's my pleasure. It's been so much fun.
Maybe next time there won't be a pandemic, I hope, but we'll take what the good Lord gives us, right?
Yeah, there you go. Maybe next time we'll do it on a plane or something like that, sitting next to each other.
There you go. There you go. All right, Ken. God bless, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Blessings to you guys.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. We would love to hear your ideas for future content. Please visit supportraisingsolutions.org/feedback to share your thoughts and questions. Also, wherever you download your podcast from, be sure to subscribe for future episodes and come back each week to gain more insight into the process of building and maintaining your personal support team.